and welcome to Module 1, Business Structures and Licensing. My name is Chris Clausing. I am going to be working with you as we go through the content areas related to chapters 1 and 2 of your Contractor's Manual. So you're going to want to make sure you have your Contractor's Manual handy. We're going to be reviewing all the content potentially that you could see on the Business and Finance test, and also this particular content. You might also see it on the contract administration exam. So if you're a general building or residential contractor, you could see it on that contract administration trade portion of your test. So it's an important module to want to get through the material here. If you have any questions as we go through it, you can join our student orientation every Monday from 5 to 6:30, or jump on our office hours every Wednesday from 11 to 1, or you can always send us an email at any time. The email address will be on the bottom right of every page here, so you have access to it, and just send us questions as you go through. And also, just wanted to make you aware of a service that we offer at Gold Coast, application processing services. You don't need this yet, but when the time comes to apply for your license, we definitely can help you through that process as well. This is just some information about a little bit of the pricing and what we offer. There's 3 different levels. You can just scan that QR code, and when the time comes, we're happy to help you go through the application process. Let's go ahead and get the Contractor's Manual out. So we're going to be reviewing chapters 1 and 2, and also be great if you could have a highlighter. So you'll be highlighting things as we go through the course material. And you can also, in your book, you can highlight, you can underline, but you cannot handwrite. So you want to avoid handwriting any notes in the reference book. And then as we go through, we're going to be doing a ton of little practice questions as we go through the course material. And you're also going to have a Module 1 practice quiz or practice exam available to you through your student account. So you want to make sure and take advantage of all these practice questions that you have available, because that's really the secret sauce. That's what you absolutely need to do, is practice as many questions as you can. So a little bit about the Business and Finance exam. It is a 120 question test, although you're going to see 125 questions on the exam. You have 5 pilot questions. So you have 6.5 hours to complete that test. And so it seems like a lot of time, but it's really not. You have basically just over 3 minutes per question. So you have to really manage your time as wisely as possible. We're going to be teaching you some techniques here through this module and all the modules, where we try to get you to identify the topic of the question, figure out which book that question should be in, where you're going to search for that question in the index table of contents, and then go in and actually finding it and being able to navigate through, skimming headings and subheadings of the sections that you're in. And then, of course, not spending too much time per question, understanding this 3 to 4 minute window. So you need a 70% or more to pass the exams. So be 70% of 120, which is 84 questions. And again, those 5 pilot questions, they don't count for you. They don't count against you. So you want to make sure that you answer all the questions on the exam. If you don't answer a question on the test, it actually counts against you, assuming it's not a pilot question. So is it open book? Well, we know that it is, which is great, but it's also can make the test more difficult, because even though it's open book, they can ask you anything out of these books. And it's not really a test of what you know, it's more a test of what you can find. So we teach you how to navigate these books, and this whole module and all the modules from here on out are designed to get you familiar with how the books are laid out, and the most important materials within those sections. And then, of course, how to navigate and find answers to practice questions that you're presented throughout the materials. These are the books that are allowed into the test. You have your AIA documents, the 201, 401, and 701, the Contractor's Manual, which is 10 chapters, and the Builder's Guide to Accounting, which is just an accounting book divided into 3 parts. And we reviewed all of these materials and books in all the modules 1 through 7, which cover the Business and Finance prep. Now, this happens to be Module 1. You do not have to take these modules in order. They're all sort of independent of each other. However, the modules 2, 3, and 4 are related to bookkeeping and accounting. Might be a good idea to take all 3 of those modules or review those 3 modules at one time. But everything else is independent of each other. So some test taking tips. This is the trick method. I like this strategy a lot. This is what I use to sort of break down questions and try to understand where to go and how to find that information in the book. The T stands for topic. We want to try to find the keyword in the question and also in the answer options. Let's not forget these are multiple choice tests as well, and always going to have one answer is the correct answer. So you're going to see some of those keywords. You can utilize the answer options as well to help you get some keywords and some words to try to look up within the index or the table of contents. But once we know the keywords, then we can usually identify which reference book it's going to be in. Business finance is a little easier because you have 3 books. That's all you have. Whereas the trade exams tend to be a lot more books, code books, trade books, and other books that you have to take into those tests. So for business finance, it's pretty straightforward. But we're still going to need to be able to identify whether it's a contractor's manual, is it BGA, if it's an accounting question, if it's a contract question, is it AIA, or is it Chapter 8 of Contractor's Manual? So these are the sorts of things that as you go through the course material, you might start out pretty slow, taking a long time per question to try to figure it out. And that's okay. As you go through and practice more and are exposed to more of the modules, it will get faster. I promise you that. Once we have the right reference, then we need to go and use that topic or that keyword we found in step 1 and identify it within the index or the table of contents, or maybe our tabs or sections within our highlights once we've had the books highlighted. So this is where you're going to search for those keywords. Then once we get into, we kind of know which section of the book it is, we got to go in there and try to find the answer specifically. Call that confirming your answer. If you already have the answer, if you know the answer, it's memorized, and you just know it's absolutely, you have it off the top of your head, you don't have to go through the confirmation process. Just do the answer and move on. But if you're not quite sure, if you need to verify, you want to go in and find that in the book. And then, of course, keep moving. Want to make sure that we're always aware of the time. That 6.5 hours goes pretty quick. So what is the best way to search for the answers in the reference books? Well, in my opinion, it's the index. Not every book has an index. A Contractor's Manual does. BGA has an index. The AIA 201 has an index, but the 401 and 701 do not have index. So you have to focus mostly on the table of contents there. But if you have an index, that's typically the best way to start to use to search for the keywords. Now, if your contractor's manual, you want to search in the back and see if your contractor's manual has an index. If it does not, then I would recommend you email us, contractor@goldcoastschools.com, and happy to send you. I have a highlighted index, which a lot of students have found very useful for that test. So I'm happy to send that to you. You can either transfer the highlights over if you don't have a color printer, or if you have a color printer, you can just print it out. You do have to bind the index that you take in. So put it in the 3-ring binder and you should be good to go. Now, sometimes broader keywords can lead you to more list of specific keywords within an index, especially the contractor's manual. And you'll find that in most indexes that you use is you got to start sometimes with a more broad keyword, and then underneath that more broad keyword are more specific targeted keywords that typically listed in alphabetical order. So you got to practice using your CM index as we go through the courses, chapter 1 and 2 and module 1. Definitely you're going to be doing a lot of looking up in your index, so this will be good practice for that. And if you can't find the keyword in the index, so what is your alternative? If as we already kind of discussed it, that would be your table of contents or maybe your tabs. But all of those things are meant to get you into the right section of the book, where then you have some things highlighted and you get the pages are kind of laid out in a way that is easy to navigate. That is the goal. That is why you do the highlighting, so that you're not just stuck with 2 full pages of text, that the text has a little rhyme or reason and all the major topics are identified with the highlights. So you want to review the table of contents to familiarize yourself with the potential keywords during the exam. So each chapter of Contractor's Manual has a table of contents in front of it. And then when we get to chapter 2, you'll see that the Florida statutes we'll be reviewing in chapter 2, each one of the statutes also has a table of contents. So we'll be reviewing that when we get to the second part of this module. And then you want to read the table of contents and index several times, start to finish. I think that's good advice. I like that. It's probably the only thing I would have you read in these books. Do not read these books from cover to cover unless you want to. But yeah, you don't have to. Like I said, they're open book tests, and the key is to be familiar enough with the content to know how to navigate to get to the right answer. So as far as highlighting and underlining, you can use multiple colors. You can underline, but don't use red ink. Red ink, they do not allow you to go into the testing center with your own materials, your own pencil or paper. You have to use what they provide you in the testing center, and the writing utensil they usually provide you has red ink. So You want to avoid red ink, and then highlight your table of contents and index. The key with the highlighting, in my opinion, is don't over highlight, just highlight things that are keywords or major topics. And because sometimes if you do too much highlighting, it's the same as doing no highlighting at all. So you can just use your best judgment with that. Okay, let's start with chapter 1 of Contractor's Manual. This one is the very beginning of the book and reviews business planning and organizations. So just review the table of contents of chapter 1, just to get familiar with the major topics that are included in it. We're going to be reviewing the index. So go ahead and either take out your index if you have one already separated out, or if there's an index in the back of your book. Or again, if you don't have one, please email us, and I'm happy to send you a copy of a highlighted index that we have. But we're going to be reviewing some of the most important parts of the index, and, in my opinion, that I think would be very helpful for you to highlight and to notate. So what are the topics for today's module? We're doing module 1, business structures, business organizations, licensing. So those might be some good keywords to start with: business, corporations, licenses. Let's start with B first. So again, we're reviewing the index. So go ahead and get your index out. And if you look for business, what did you find? So under business, you're going to see quite a bit options there. Business is a good general keyword. Underneath it are the more specific keywords, and they're all alphabetized, which is really helpful. Let's search for types of businesses. So under T for types of businesses, you see the same thing. And you'll see that quite a bit in the indexes of all these books, is that there's multiple paths to the same answer, which is good. So it's not just one way to do it. There's multiple ways a lot of times to get to the correct answer, to the correct section of the book. Let's search for corporation. So under C for corporation, we have, again, a list of corporations, a more general term, and underneath it are going to be more specific terms related to corporations: advantages, disadvantages, dissolution, limited liability, etc. And then again, types of business. Search for fictitious names. Fictitious names, that's something we'll review. And that's just a single keyword. Pretty specific, but it has its own section in there. So sometimes you'll see more specific keywords also included in the index. This is why it's really good to become familiar with the index, what's in there, what's not in there. That's going to serve you well on test day. Search for forms. This is a really important keyword. Forms is all the forms listed that are referenced throughout the book. So there's quite a few out of chapter 1, but you'll see also forms out of various other chapters here. This is a very, very important keyword, in my opinion. So you want to make sure that you kind of know where forms is located in the index. Let's search for partnership. Partnership, again, more of a general keyword, and then has the more specific sub keywords underneath. And search for S corporation. So S corporation is a little more specific, but it has its own section in the index, section page 1-11. And just, I'm sure you've already realized this, but you'll see that, for instance, the 1-11, 1 is the chapter reference and 11 is the page within that chapter. Search for small business administration. Again, it's there in the index, 1-30. Search for sole proprietorship. And you'll see that as well in its own section. And search for sales tax. And you'll see sales tax again in there, 1-15. And as we go through all this content and all the practice questions, please feel free to pause the videos. You can rewind, you can fast forward. You have access to watching these videos an unlimited amount of times. So this is meant to help you and to get you through the content. We're going to go pretty fast paced, so you're going to definitely want to use that pause button. Okay, so now we're going to basically just go through sequentially through the pages that I feel like the most important information is on, so that you get comfortable with the layouts of each chapter 1 and 2. And so as we go through, you're going to see the page numbers that we're on at the top of each page. So in this case, the very top, CM chapter 1 overview, CM 1-5. So we're going to be on page 1-5, or it might show you a range of pages here. So that way you can always reference and see where we're at, so you don't get lost. And these are just things, as we go through these questions, these are items that I would recommend that you highlight. These things may already be highlighted for you if you have the highlighting guides or you have the highlighted books. it's okay. If they're already highlighted, that's great. If they're not, you want to make sure and go ahead and highlight these things. So page 1-5, if you look through that page, you're going to see construction is similar to other businesses as it relates to these 4 items. What are these 4 items? And again, you can always feel free to pause, and then you can just come back to the video to verify that you found the right answer. And in this case, it's planning, organization, management, structure, page 1-5. What are the 5 general guidelines you can follow when working on your business plan? So again, we're going to be on that page 1-5 through 1-7. So we've got the executive summary, the description, the researching of your market, funding, as well as projections. So you want to review the bullets for all of these sections. And anytime that I say review or note, I'm not saying that you should go back and read through all those. Just make sure that the sections, the important sections, are highlighted and that you kind of remember where they are, or that you have access to them, or you can navigate to them from the index, or just you want to be able to find the information. That's the key. The details of organizing your construction business entails, but is not limited to, what? So on page 1-7, you'll see all of these there. These are bulleted out. And the SBA notes that business location has an effect on costs regarding items such as what? So on page 1-8, you will see these items here. Salaries, property values, rental rates, business insurance rates, utilities, government licensing, and fees. Now, the types of business organization you select depends on what criteria. And this is also on page 1-8. And you'll see that these are the criteria here that are listed. This is just some general things to highlight, note, to know that are there. Let's practice a little bit using the trick method that we discussed a little earlier. When we are presented with a question, we just want to try to have a process that we can break down the question and try to understand, how to go about finding the answer. So what is the simplest form of business organization? So let's think about the T for topic. What is our topic here? Well, business organization makes sense. That's about what the topic is. We know we're in Contractor's Manual because we happen to be in, that's the 2 chapters we're in. The index, if we go to the index, business types of, it sends us to page 1-8. When we get to 1-8, we notice that point, sole proprietorship. And we know that that shows as the simplest form of business organization when we skim through that material. So then we want to keep moving. We've answered the question. We've confirmed it. Let's move on to the next one. Remember, you have 3 minutes or so per question, but you want to make sure and go through and answer all the easy questions first through your first pass of the test. Okay, what are the 2 types of partnerships recognized in Florida? Well, the topic here is partnerships. We know we're in Contractor's Manual. Again, partnerships, types of business. That takes us to 1-9. And we see that it's general and limited. And we want to go ahead and keep moving. And I would be keeping track, just very roughly. You don't have to do, second by second, but just kind of keep track of how long these questions are sort of taking you to go through this method. Identify the topic, find it in the index, go within the chapter and locate the answer. That to me is, if you start to whittle that down to the 2-3 minute range, then that's really great progress. What percentage of stock ownership is required for control of a corporation? Well, our topic here, corporation, control, business, these are all pretty good options for topics and keywords. We know we're in Contractor's Manual. Let's go to corporation and see. It's a pretty broad keyword, should give us a lot of options. Under that, we see types of business. That seems to correlate with what we want to find here. We're on 1-11. And then when we skim on that section, we go to that page, we see 51% or more actually on 1-12. So you can see it kind of gets us in the right neighborhood, but not in the exact right spot. So be prepared to skim and try to skim headings, subheadings, and highlights. And then we're going to keep moving. So in a sole proprietorship, the owner manages the business and is responsible for all what? So if we look on 1-8, you see that sole proprietorship, they explain this, that the owner is responsible for all decisions. Now, in a sole proprietorship, the owner has blank authority over all business decisions. So we're in the same spot, and we see that as a sole proprietor, the owner has absolute authority. So on page 1-8, you're going to note the advantages and disadvantages of a sole proprietorship. That is something that's been on the exam quite a bit. So all these advantages and disadvantages of all these different structures could be fair game for the test. All right, next question. The Florida Uniform Partnership Act defines a what as two or more persons associating themselves as co-owners for the purposes of carrying on a business for profit. 1-9, you should see the Florida Uniform Partnership Act, and they define that as a partnership. See page 1-9 so that you can note the items that should be included in a partnership agreement. Each general partner is fully and blank liable as co-owners of the business. So on this one, if you look at 1-10, you'll see that they're personally liable. So general partners are not only liable for their percentage of ownership in the company, but they're also wholly liable for all the debts of the company. And that's an important distinction between that and a corporation, or even a limited partner. Now, a limited partnership is an entity comprised of at least one general partner and which, in addition, has blank or more limited partners. So how many limited partners does a limited partnership need? And if you look on page 1-10, you'll see that it needs at least one limited partner. What is a limited partner? So on CM 110, they explain that limited partners are immune from liability beyond the amount of their investment. That is different than a general. They cannot be involved in day-to-day operations. That's a very important distinction. So a limited partner cannot be there on a daily basis. No subordinate can be reporting to them. They're basically just passive investors. Qualifying business cannot be a limited partner. We talk about qualifying businesses in chapter 2 of this module, so stay tuned for that. More passive investor, as I mentioned. And limited partnerships may have any number of limited partners, but must always have at least one general partner. So a limited partnership does have to have a general partner who's going to take on a bulk of that liability, but the limited partners are just limited to these items here. See page 110, you're going to see the advantages and disadvantages of partnerships. And again, we're not looking to memorize those or read through all of those, just know they're there. So if they ask you that question, you can skim through and find the answer for them. Now, joint ventures, another type of business structure, 110 through 111. That's a special combination of two or more persons or entities. These are typically for bigger projects or one-off projects. The rights that govern substantially by the same rules as partnerships. So they're basically partnerships. Generally thought of as special partnerships for specific jobs. And as I mentioned, typically limited to a single transaction. And then the control of the business is the same as partnership. So joint venture and partnership have a lot in common. Now, the corporate form of business is usually the blank to organize. So on page 1-11, we'll see that for corporations, it is the costliest. And that's because of all the paperwork and regulation that's required. See page 111, you can note the advantages and disadvantages of corporations. The S corporation is not affected by corporate income taxes, thereby eliminating the blank taxation feature of standard corporations. So let's see if we can find that in the book. And again, we're going to be on page 1-11. And that is the double taxation. So that S corp allows us to not have to pay that corporate tax, that any corporate profit gets passed through to the personal income tax in an S corp situation. And as an S corp, you would need to elect that status from the IRS. That's not something that's automatically done. See page 112, you're going to note the requirement to elect S corp status and control the business. And you're going to also note the points to consider in the area of organizing your workforce. And that's all on page 1-12. 1-13, we're moving kind of through chapter 1. We're going to note the registration requirements for each county. Could be an occupational license or certificate of occupancy or some kind of zoning or use permit. 114 notes the registration requirements for the state level. So that could be a corporate filing, the fees that go to the division of corporations, could be a fictitious name registration. So if you intend to operate, promote, and advertise your business to the public, basically using another name other than your corporate name, you would file a fictitious name registration, and that way you could do business under a different name other than your legal name. And this is in compliance with the Fictitious Name Act on page CM 1-14. Now, any person who fails to comply with the Fictitious Name Act commits a blank of the second degree. So this is going to be some sort of penalty. That's going to be misdemeanor. That's CM-114. Now, fictitious name registration. On page 114, you'll see about 4 or 5 paragraphs there. Must be advertised one time in a newspaper. The owner must record a name change or cancellation within 30 days. These registrations are valid for 5 years, and they expire on December 31st of the 5th year. And then there's renewal requirements between July 1st and December 31st of that 5th year, the year that it expires. You just want to highlight these major points within those 4 or 5 paragraphs under that section. The businesses that collect sales tax must register with which state department? That's a good question. We can use the trick method for this. Our topics here: taxes, sales tax, state departments, business. There's a lot of different options here. We know we're in Contractor's Manual. That's a perfect chapter 1 question. Taxes, state sales tax, that takes us to 1-15. And then from there, you can find the answer, Department of Revenue. And then we're going to keep moving. So hopefully you start to see your time looking for these questions sort of go down and down and down. That's the ultimate goal. So what is the state retail sales tax rate in Florida? Now, this might be something you already know or memorized. And if that's the case, great. You answer it and you move on to the next question. But if you're not quite sure, topic here would be tax or sales tax. Contractor's Manual is our reference. When we go into our index, we can see taxes and then state sales tax. It takes us right to 115. And there we identify it at 6%. And then we keep moving, move on to the next question. So doing a great job. So what is a DR1? Well, remember in the index, we talked about forms. That seems like a good spot. Application for certificate of registration, that takes you to CM 115, also known as a sales tax number. And what is an SS4? Again, the forms be a pretty good spot for this. And that's the application for employer ID number, EIN. And the SS4 form must be filed on or before the what day after the date on which the business begins. So how many days do you have before when you start the business to have to file this? And you'll see in page 1-15, 7 days. Go to page 1-16, you're going to know qualifying agent. We did more in chapter 2, so don't worry too much about qualifying agent yet. Partnership, joint venture, or corporation that engages in contracting must obtain a qualifying agent. So qualifying agent is the one who has the license. And so the corporations or businesses do not have the ability to have licenses. It belongs to the individual. So see pages 116 through 118. You're going to note the bullets for regulations, taxes, finance, leasing, insurance, etc. All of those bullets there. And what are the 7 principal duties of an effective and responsible manager? So there you're going to be reviewing these items here: planning, organizing, directing, controlling, standardizing, assigning, and communicating. These are the main subheadings there. And then what are the 3 basic steps to ending a partnership? This is important, and you'll see this on page 1-21, dissolution, winding up, and termination. Now, each of these is a little different. We want to kind of explain what each one of these are. So dissolution is not to be confused with termination. So dissolution is not, dissolution of the partnership is not terminated, but continues until all the partnership affairs are complete. So that's called winding up. Basically, you're just trying to wind up all the affairs of that partnership. Termination is the point when all the partners' affairs are wound up. So that's, first of all, it'll be dissolution, winding up, and then termination. And that's why you have the 3 steps here. What are the 4 circumstances that can cause a partnership to be dissolved? This is also an important section, and you'll see this on 121. I think it goes to 122 as well. Unlawful activity, that will cause a partnership to be dissolved. Death that causes it as well, which is different than a corporation. A corporation can survive the death of the owner, whereas a partnership does not. Bankruptcy and court decree. These are just 4 things you want to highlight there. And what are the 2 types of dissolution? Well, you got voluntary and involuntary. You'll see this on 1-22. And then you'll note the 3 procedures for the voluntary dissolution of corporation. And then you'll note the 2 exceptions to recognizing a gain on distribution of assets in the event of dissolution. This is all on 122 and 123. And moving on to 124 and 125, just note the various resources on this page, the government agencies, different resources you have available to you as a small business owner in Florida. And while you're on that page, 124, who are the permitting agencies for construction of any structure in or across any navigable waters of the U.S.? And you'll see that as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, or the FDEP. And what is the name of the board that regulates construction in Florida? This will become a bigger topic, more discussed in Chapter 2. And of course, that's the Construction Industry Licensing Board, CILB. That's page 1-25. And see pages 126 through 132, some additional resources on these pages. Again, you don't have to memorize all these. You don't have to read through all this. Just know kind of what's there and where to access it if you get questions on those specific pages. So let's find the names of the following forms. If you go to page 126, you can see these forms on 126, and I think they continue to 127. But the form 940, the form 941, the UCS one, the UCT 6S, and then moving on to the next page, the DR 601AC, and the DR 601AI, and the DR 405. So those should be pretty easy to access, and I'm sure you found those pretty quick, so that's great. Let's take a look at 127 to 132. Chapter ends with a review of various organizations available for small business support and training. So again, just sort of additional information within the contractor's manual. And the contractor's manual is really, obviously, we're trying to get you familiar with the aspects for the exam, but it also has some good references and resources that you'll use or could use in your actual business life. So just review Chapter 1. It has a lot of good resources there, some basic things that you can reach out for support when you start your contracting business or while you're operating your company. And now we'll move on to Chapter 2. Okay, let's dive into Chapter 2. This is our licensing chapter. Before we get into Chapter 2, I want to briefly go over some of the terminology or some of the words or concepts that we're going to be reviewing when we go through this course material. So for Chapter 2 licensing, really, this chapter covers 3 major or significant statutes. One statute is the Florida Statute FS 455. The next statute is Florida Statute 489. And the statute after that, I would say, is your board rules. and those are 61G4. So these are important. The three most important statutes that we're going to be reviewing within Chapter 2. Florida Statute 455 covers the provisions for the DBPR. This is the Division of Business and Professional Regulation. DBPR is the organization that is actually the one issuing your license. So when you have your license, you're going to see the DBPR logo on it. The 489 covers the statute requirements for licensing for the DBPR. So this is going to be, this 489 is divided into basically three parts. You have part 1 covers contractors, part 2 covers electrical and alarm, part 3 covers septic. Okay, so we really only care about part 1. And also the 489 allows for the construction industry to have its own board. So DBPR doesn't actually manage the construction industry licensing provisions. The statute gives the DBPR the authority to give that role to the CILB. So the board rules are all about what the CILB can and cannot do. It gives them their roadmap for disciplinary action and for citations and fines and rules that they have associated with that. So you're going to see 455 for DBPR, 489 for really the construction industry. Part 1 is what we care about, and then the board rules, the CILB 61G4. This is the board rule we care about. Electrical has their own board. They're covered under 61G6, and septic has its own kind of board rule provisions for the Department of Health. Those are set forth in part 3. Again, we don't really care about that. It's not going to be covered on the state test for your Division 1 and Division 2 license. And that's another thing I want to mention is you're going to also hear the word Division 1 and Division 2. Division 1 is a licensing category that covers general building and residential contractors. We call that GBR. So general building and residential contractors, that's Division 1. Division 2 is all your subcontractor trades. So that's going to be roofing or plumbing, AC, full spa, glass glazing, etc. Okay, so if I say Division 1 contractor, that's what I mean. If I say Division 2 contractor, that's what I mean. And so this is just kind of a general basic understanding of some of the terminology that you're going to see. So before we dive in, just so you're kind of aware of that. So let's go ahead. I'm going to just erase this real quick, and then I'm going to share back our presentation so we can go through Chapter 2. And as I mentioned in the very beginning, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please feel free to email us. Okay, let's go back to our screen share here. Okay, now we're back in Chapter 2. So let's dive right in here. So on Chapter 2, let's go to the table of contents of Chapter 2. We're going to review the topics for potential keywords there. So go ahead and just review that on your own time. You'll see that Chapter 2 is divided into 2 general parts. You got Part 1, that's the summary of the statutes and rules. So those first, let's say 25, 30 pages are all just summarizing what's in the second half, which is reprints, actual reprints of those statutes. Now, we'll make you aware the statutes that are in the book are actually statutes that are previous editions. So in 2003, many of these statutes were updated, have been changed. So you're going to be asked questions out of what's in this book right now. So for the statutes part of it, it's important to just go with what's in the book. Don't worry about stuff that's been updated or changed in more recent statutes. Now, that said, there aren't too significant changes, but I'll kind of let you know when stuff's changed or is different, just so you're aware of it. But you want to go with what's in the book. Okay. This is the most important parts, as I mentioned, Chapter 455, that's the DBPR section, 49 Part 1, and the 61G4. All right. Now in our index, let's go to, and we'll start doing identify some of those keywords. Let's look at L for licensing. Now, again, you have multiple references here in alphabetical order, which is great, but these are all specific to DBPRs. So DBPR is all license types. So it could be barbers, cosmetologists, different types of veterinarians, anything, any license, alcohol, beverage, alcohol, tobacco, anything that is required for licensure. The DBPR has a license for it, but construction is just one of those types. So this is going to lead you to all the provisions related to the Florida Statute 455 if you do just a licensing. Now, if you go to L for licensing construction, now you're in business. Now you're going to see everything that's specific to primarily Florida Statute 489. So this is an important part, and you'll see a section there, definitions. These are just important things to be highlighting within your index. And you'll note that the three parts to the Florida Statute 489, remember we already talked about that: construction, contracting, electrical, alarm, and septic. For exam purposes, we're going to focus on part one. I would make sure that each part is separated. They actually reprint all three parts in the book. And so you want to separate those with either a tab. Well, you want to separate those with your permanent tabs. Otherwise, they kind of merge into one another. So just make sure those are separated out. Now you want to find Florida Administrative Code. That's the very, very beginning of the index. And you'll see that you have the board rules are all separated out there. This is where you can find all the board rules. We're focusing on 61G4. So again, the intent of the index reviews is just to get you familiar with what the index is, how they're laid out, and also for you to be able to highlight some of the most important keywords that you'll probably see on the test. Find Florida statutes. So that again is the beginning of the index. And when you go there, you'll see the DBPR, and they have 455 there. Licensing construction 489, lien law, that's something out of chapter 9, that's covered in a separate module. And then workers' comp 440, again, also covered in a separate module. So you'll see Florida statutes reprinted throughout this whole book, as well as some federal provisions reprinted in the book. Let's search for boards. So under boards, you have construction licensing. Search for DBPR. You'll see a ton of stuff. This is a great general keyword, and you can see essentially all of the provisions in alphabetical order under DBPR. Search for definitions. Again, these are just items of note. So you have continuing education, DBPR, licensing instruction, licensing electrical. Again, licensing instruction is the primary one. Search for exemptions, licensing specific to construction. And you'll see it there. So that's going to give you, if you get a question on who's exempt from licensing, you could go here and you'll see that you want to go to that licensing construction is going to be relevant. Search for insurance public liability. This is also important. You'll see this in 3 different parts of the book. So anytime you see that within the licensing, this 216, 2131, 2188, there's 3 different sections. It's probably going to be a reference to that in the summary, which is kind of the first half. Then the second one's going to be a reference to that within the statute itself. And then the third one's probably going to be a reference within the board rule. So sometimes you'll see, in this case, public liability charts within all 3 sections. Search for IRS. We're going to cover this a little bit. Common law test, who's an employee, who's an independent contractor. You might get a question or 2 related to that. So we'll show you where that information is. And that reference to Circular E, as of this recording, the state is not asking questions out of Circular E. So if you come across questions on Circular E at any other modules, you can just disregard those until further notice. Search for notices, license renewal. This is important. And you can see all the different notices there throughout all these different chapters. So that's a very good keyword within the index. Search for penalties. So you'll see penalties, a lot of stuff there related to chapter 2, IRS subcontractor licensing construction. Again, 282 and 2158. That's probably 282 is probably the statute. 158 is probably the border rule. Theft of an exam, that's important. That's actually out of statute 455. Unlicensed activity, and you have multiple references there. Search for qualifying agent. There you go. We have that chapter 1, which is not where I would go for qualifying agents. Chapter 2 is where you go. And again, you have probably the summary, the statute, and the border rule. Okay, let's try some practice questions now. We're going to go through starting on page 2-5. Again, this is going to be just to get you familiar with the content of the book and see if we can highlight some of these things. The regulation of a profession is generally accomplished by what? Well, we've been talking about it, and that's going to be by licensing, 2-5. And in Florida, most non-medical professional and occupational licensing boards are located within what state agency? And again, we already kind of discussed that as well. So who oversees all of these boards? That's DBPR. And then you have a section 2-5 on professional boards. So made up primarily of members of the regulated profession appointed by the governor. The boards and not the DBPR make final decisions on licensure, which is important. So even though the DBPR logo is on your license, the people that actually approve or deny licenses is the specific board itself. In our case, CILB. Ensure applicants are eligible to be licensed, investigate complaints, take disciplinary action. All right. Which statute provides for the licensure and regulation of all types of contractors in Florida? So we talked about it already. That's the Florida Statute 489. And that's specifically going to be part 1 is for construction contracting. So what is the difference between the board rules and the Florida Statute 489? So this one's not really in the book, so I don't want you to be searching for this one. So this is just my interpretation, how I explain it. Like, what is the difference? You have a statute that says one thing, and then you got the board rule. Why do you need both? Well, the state statute, that they create the law. They basically say you need, for instance, for contractors to be licensed in Florida, you need to pass an exam or exams. But the statute doesn't tell you which exams. They don't tell you how many questions are on the exams. They don't tell you what the content areas of those exams should be. Those are worked out through the board itself, actually gives you more details. So I say the statute creates the law, the CILB enforces the law through license approval denial, penalties, fines, and also anything related to, what should be carried out in terms of exam requirements or experience requirements, et cetera. All that is determined by the CILB, and they give them that authority to do that. So you will see that there is overlap. The statute will say one thing, the board will also say that one thing, but maybe probably expand upon it to make it a little less general and more specific. So what are board rules? 61G4, Florida Administrative Code. So Florida Administrative Code is where the rules for state agencies are written. So the board itself, they have to make sure that the rules that they write are legal. So that's what this Florida Administrative Code does, and they review all the language. Florida Statute 49.107, that's the statute that created the CILB. And you'll see it's going to be very important for you to start to be able to navigate these statutes through section numbers. So if you go to the table of contents of the Florida Statute 489, which you'll see starts on page 2-58, and you'll see a table of contents there. And you'll see the first section is 49.101 purpose, then 49.103, 49.105, 49.107, and so on and so forth. So those are all the section numbers. And so we're going to be going through a lot of those section numbers in the next few minutes. So get familiar with how these section numbers are laid out. These are not page numbers. These are section numbers within the statute itself. All right, so if you go in the table of contents to 489.107, you'll see that that one is Construction Industry Licensing Board. That's the name of that section. And then you can go to the page. The page happens to be 266, but the table of contents within the statute does not give you page numbers. So you gotta learn to navigate through section numbers. All right, and you can see right there, 2-66 on the bottom right-hand column. Now to carry out, again, what are the board rules? To carry out the provisions of this part, there is created within the department the Construction Industry Licensing Board. Members are appointed by the governor. They're subject to confirmation by the Senate. Members shall be appointed for 4-year terms, and no member shall serve more than 2 consecutive 4-year terms or more than 11 years on the board. All right. So what are the 3 parts of the Florida Statute 489? So we talked about them already. We have parts 1, 2, and 3. And that's 2-5. Part 1 of the Florida Statute 489 provides for the formation of which regulatory board for construction contracting? That's CILB. And that one has, that board has 18 members. And the CILB is divided into Division 1 and Division 2. So we talked about what Division 1 was. That's general building residential contractors, or Division 1 contractors. Division 2 are subcontractors, roofing, AC, plumbing, pool spa, glass glazing. Those are the ones that we cover as far as exam prep. The CILB is divided into how many divisions? Well, already spilled the beans on that one as well. Division 1 and Division 2. 2-6. Part 2 is regulated by the Electrical Contractors Licensing Board. They have 11 members. And Part 3 is regulated by Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services, HRS, or within that HRS is the Department of Health, DOH. Construction contracting, this is page 2-6. Generally, any person who for compensation undertakes to, submits a bid to, or does himself or others construct, repair, alter, etc., for others or for resale to others must be licensed. So this is why you're here. You need a license to do any of these things. The term demolish applies only to demolition of steel tanks, towers, and other structures, not buildings or residences, over how many feet in height? This is a question that they have asked a ton on the test. And that one you'll find at 50 feet, that's CM 2-6. A person must be certified or registered in order to engage in the business of contracting in Florida. You basically have to ask, well, any person who wants to engage in contracting statewide, those would be certified contractors, and you have to pass the appropriate exams. That's what you're doing here. You're getting ready to sit for your certified exams. And if you wanted to just work within a specific county and you did not care about working outside of, let's say, Broward or whatever your county is, you could get a registered license within that county. And that would be actually registered at the state level, but it only allows you to do business within that county. You would have to get registered in every county you'd want to do business in. So the certified is a statewide licensure. The counties cannot require you then to get a local license. And the registered licenses, though, are county by county. And there's quite a bit of changes going on for the registered or local contracting license section. So there's a lot of these local licenses that are going away. But that's not really relevant for this discussion, but you will definitely want to go the certified route if at all possible. So a subcontractor, however, who is not certified or registered may perform construction work under the supervision of a person who is certified or registered, as long as, and this is the bullet points, this is related to subcontractors and their licensing requirements, the workers within the scope of the supervising contractor's license. So if you're a certified general contractor, as an example, you can hire workers to do the shell work, to do the block, to lay the steel, to place the slabs. those individuals would not need a license to do that work because they're working under your supervision. Supervising contractor is responsible for all the work, and the subcontractor being supervised is not engaged in construction work that would require a license as a contractor. All right. So what certified general contractors or building or residential contractors cannot do is mechanical, electrical, or plumbing. Those require separate licenses. Roofing, under very rare circumstances, a contractor can do a roof, but typically that needs to be subcontracted out to a roofing contractor. So licensing requirements: construction and electrical or alarm system contractors must be licensed in one of two ways under Chapter 489. So as a certified contractor or as a registered. So that's page 2-6. A certified contractor is a contractor successfully passes the state administrator exam. That's what we're doing here. We're going to get you through those tests. Obtains a certificate of competency issued by the DVPR. Certified contractors are allowed to contract in any city, county, or district in the state without being required to fulfill the competency requirements of that jurisdiction. So you do not have to go get approval or any kind of license with the local jurisdiction to do that work. Now, they could still require you to open up a business license of some kind or a sales tax ID of some kind, but to do the work, they cannot require licensure. Or they cannot require you to have a local license. A registered is any contractor who is registered with DVPR and fulfilled the competency requirements for the city, county, or district. Registered contractors can only contract in that jurisdiction. So it's a much more limiting. And what you're doing here, you're preparing to be certified, which is the way to go. So see page CM 2-7, you can note the eligibility requirements for certification as a construction contractor. And you'll note the experience requirements as well. These explain eligibility criteria for upgrading to a higher license to exam after a certain period of time. Experience in education 2-8, CILB will accept a lawfully acquired experience gained under the supervision of a contractor who at the time was properly licensed in that category. So if your experience, as long as it was lawfully acquired, which means that it was a project with a licensed contractor who, if a permit was required, which it probably was, pulled that permit, their license was active when they were doing the work, they weren't working outside the scope of their license, all of that is legally acquired experience. For the certified general or building contractor's license, your experience, you have to have experience in a minimum of 4 of these structural categories. So you don't have to have this on every project. You have to have this on 4 of these combined with all the projects that you're listing on your application. So foundations or slabs in excess of 20,000 square feet, masonry walls, steel, elevated slabs, columns, or formwork. So again, those are the requirements for certified general or building licensing. And then for residential, it's a little different. It's still foundation slabs, but you don't have the 20,000 square foot requirement. Masonry walls is there, and columns are there, but they also add structural demolition and structural wood framing. So that's going to be like trusses that you put on the roof. And you only need 3 of these 5 categories. Again, that's just for CRC, certified residential. So how many minimum person hours are used to determine full-time equivalency for experience? So when they say experience, they're talking about, when they say a year of experience, this is what they're basing it on. Go to 2-9. They consider it 2,000 hours. So where do they get that number? Well, they take 40 hours a week at 50 weeks. And that's where they're saying that if you say you have 1 year of experience, it should have been 2,000 hours of work for that year. That's the CILB requirement. See pages 2-9 through 2-10 for appropriate bachelor degrees for area certification sought. This is a little bit of a tricky area. Your experience offset, and again, this is not necessarily in the book, so this is just some additional commentary just to clarify. So your experience, you have to have 4 years of experience in the field or the category in which you want to obtain your license. The state does allow you to offset up to 3 years of that experience with college credits or military service. For the experience offset provision, the degree does not have to be in construction. It can be in anything. I know that the statute here says it does, but there's another little section where it clarifies that it does not have to be. It can be any degree. So just be aware of that. So you can have an art history degree. You can have a degree in business management. Doesn't really matter. You still have that offset eligibility. Now, as far as trade exam exemptions, if you have a undergraduate 4-year plus degree in civil engineering, architecture, or construction management, there is a potential for you to be exempt from the Division I exams, the trade exams, not the business finance. Business finance, everyone has to take, doesn't matter what degree you have. But the trade exams, there is a potential exemption if you have an accredited undergrad degree, 4+ years, and you have a 3.0 or higher, which is a GPA. You could be exempt from the trades. Please email me, and I'm happy to give you a form. You can review it and see if you qualify. The state would have to approve those exemptions for you. If you're doing Division II mechanical or plumbing, then a mechanical engineering license would be sufficient, in my opinion, to meet that exemption requirement from those trade exams. So again, if you feel like you meet that, just email me and we can discuss it further. Okay. See pages 210 through 212 for certification requirements. That's for the electrical alarm. All right. And again, just as I mentioned, the criteria for register is typically not a primary focus of these exams because these exams are for certified. So just know they're there. See pages 2-12. You're going to note the special provisions for licensure of members of the armed forces and their spouses. 213 for medical gas certification and journeyman licensure. How many hours of continuing education must a licensed plumbing contractor complete to engage in the installation of medical gas? So you'll see that on page 2-13. And that's 6 hours. And on that page, you want to be careful. So you got to read the questions very carefully. So in the first paragraph, it talks about third line down, third line down, that a plumbing contractor who wants to do this, they can take 6 hours of continuing education. But if you go to the second paragraph, it says any person who is employed by a licensed plumbing contractor, they must take a course of at least 8 hours of both classroom and practical work. So be careful, because sometimes you'll see that 6 hours, sometimes you'll see that 8. So just understand, one is the contractor themselves, the other one is an employee working for the contractor. 214, you want to note the criminal history section. So the CLB has I would say a pretty low bar. If you have some criminal history, it's not necessarily an automatic denial. There's certain things that they cannot even deny if you have it. So just anyway, be aware of those bullets. And there are some things that are more serious on the next page, 2-15. But again, I've seen some pretty significant felony violations still get approved. So just be aware of that. Okay, note the criminal history section. Next page, 215 to 216, you're going to note the other license requirements. There's currently no bond option. So this is a section where I mentioned earlier where the statute's now updated and the book is not. So right now there's no bond options. So applicants with a FICO score below 660 must take a 14-hour course. If you see this question on the exam, I don't think you will, because this is different. But if you do, you got to go with what's in the book, because this is what they're asking about. I don't think you're going to get this question, but I just want to make you aware. So if you are applying and you have a FICO score under 660, there's no bond requirement anymore, but you still have to do this 14-hour financial responsibility. It's a course we offer at Gold Coast. It's a self-paced online program. You just do it at your own pace. At the end, you're issued a certificate, and you would attach that certificate to your application. And I will just be aware that probably in the next 6 months or so, they are going to change this provision again. I don't know what it's going to be, but there will be a minimum FICO score where they won't even allow you the 14-hour responsibility. So if your credit is low for whatever reason, like below 500, below 550 in that range, it's in your best interest to go through with this licensure as soon as you can. See page 2-16. This is the chart for the minimum public liability and property damage. Again, this is one of those ones that you saw probably in 3 sections. I think they listed it in the summary, in the statute, and also in the board rule. And you can see that general and building contractors have the same liability, but once you get to residential and the Division 2 trades, it starts to fall off pretty significantly. So just be aware, if you get the question on the requirements for a residential contractor, it's going to be different than that of a building or general. And if approved, the workers' comp exemption takes effect how many days after filing and remains in effect until revoked, or for a period of how many years, whichever occurs sooner. So this is out of 217. And that's going to be 31 days and 2 years. Okay. Licensure as a certified or registered contractor must be renewed. How often? How many years? This will be one that you'll have memorized eventually. That's going to be every 2 years. 2-17. And each certified or registered contractor must complete at least how many hours of continuing education every 2 years to renew their license? That's going to be 14 hours. 2-17. And also at Gold Coast, we got you covered on the CE. We have great CE programs. As a Division 1, Division 2, you're going to be renewing on even years. So 2024 is an even year cycle. If you're getting your license in 2024, you would not have to renew till 26. Contractors must maintain complete financial and business records kept in the regular course of business for the immediately preceding how many years? So 217. And that's going to be 3 years, right at the very bottom. And another thing you'll see where they kind of spell out some of the numbers. Sometimes they do the numbers. They actually show the number itself. Sometimes they spell it out. What I do is I highlight any numbers that are spelled out. I'll highlight them and then I'll just underline them just so that it kind of catches my eye, so that I know that those are numbers that have been spelled out. So see pages 218 to 219. You're going to note the licensing exemptions for construction contracting. You will absolutely, I believe, get a question from this list on either the BF or the CA exams. The CA, again, that's contract administration. That's a Division 1 trade exam, one of 2 that you have to take. So if you're a Division 2 contractor, you're not going to have to take the CA exam. See pages 218 through 219. You're going to note item I on the list. The current contract price is less than $2,500 to qualify for the exemption. So you can strike through that 1,000. I don't think they're going to ask you that question, but it is 2,500 now. Again, one of those things that just changes and the book has not been updated. Assembling portable sheds that are blank square feet or less is exempt from state licensure. So look at that list and see if you can find anything on that list related to portable sheds. And you'll see it's 250. That's an important question because sometimes they will put the wrong number there. They might say 300 or 150 or something, some other number there to kind of throw you off. So just remember to read the questions carefully. So see pages 219 through 220. You're going to note the subcontracting requirements for contractors, items A through F. And see pages 220 through 221. You want to note the exemptions for electrical and alarm, as well as for the septic, but these are not typically primary topics for these exams, so I wouldn't spend too much time. Just know they're there in case they throw a random weird question at you, which they could. The state does that sometimes. Page 222, qualifying agents. This is important. Your license, and again, this is just my commentary on this, but when you obtain your license, your license is gonna be in your name, and then you're gonna either qualify a company or not, but your license is in your name. So if you want to do business as a company, you're going to qualify that company, but you're the license holder. It's very important to understand that it doesn't go with the company. So you can qualify multiple companies. You could qualify 2, 3 companies, but you are responsible as the qualifying agent for everything related to that company. So in this case, registration or certification of a person who seeks to engage in contracting in his own name will be issued only to that individual. If you're looking to engage in contracting as a partnership, corporation, or other organization, you must apply through a qualified agent. Now, if you're qualifying your own business, you are the qualifying agent for your business. Qualifying agent must be licensed. So that's why member company or organization can't be a qualifier, because they cannot have a license, because no company can have a license. It's an individual. So you have to be licensed in order to qualify a company. And I will just throw this out. When you get your license, you're going to have people coming at you left and right saying, will you qualify my business? Will you qualify my business? I would be ultra, mega, super cautious about doing that. You are ultimately responsible for all the activities of that company, as well as all the financial matters of that company, unless you have something called a financial responsible officer, an FRO. In any event, it's an incredibly risky thing to do. And it happens, people do it, but I just want you to be fully aware of the consequences of doing that. So you want to qualify your own business, and then if other people, your uncle, your cousin, or your best friend, or someone just off the street you don't even know, just remember there are a lot of risks associated with qualifying a business that you do not own in its entirety. The business organization must notify the DBPR of the termination of the qualifying agent and obtain another qualifying agent within how many days? This is an important provision as well. And right there, 2-22, you have 60 days. So if you're a qualifying agent and you're terminated, that organization is going to have 60 days to find a new qualifying agent after you're out. And you can elect to stop qualifying a company at any time. And that company would have 60 days to get a new agent. See page 222 for qualifying agents. A business organization may not engage in contracting until another qualifying agent is employed, unless a temporary non-renewable certificate of registration is issued. So the director of DBPR can actually extend that if you get permission. And that allows them to only proceed with incomplete contracts. In other words, you cannot solicit new business, you cannot enter into new contracts while that qualifying agent period is lapsed. So in a business entity with one qualifying agent, the qualifying agent is responsible for, and this is what I was telling you, all operations, all field work, unless there's an FRO, all financial matters. And that means for all the businesses you qualify. So the state of Florida, again, this is just commentary, not in the book, but the CILB is very leery of people who qualify multiple businesses. Now, one is very easy, and of course you're going to do that, and that's all done on one application. If you're qualifying 2 businesses, you will most likely appear in front of the board. They're going to ask you about that. If you qualify 3 businesses, then that's when they really start to look at you very, very closely. And I have not seen them approve anyone past 3. So doesn't mean it can't happen. There's no law against it, but they're very leery, because how can you supervise all operations of 3 separate businesses? How can you do all the field work? How can you do all the financial matters of those? So that's why it's very important to understand the responsibilities for a qualifying agent. So in those business organizations with more than one qualifying agent, so all qualifying agents jointly and equally share the responsibility. So you could have multiple qualifying agents it's not very common, but it happens maybe for bigger companies. One qualifying agent may be designated the sole qualifying agent. Okay, and then see page 222. Sole primary qualifying agent is jointly and equally responsible with secondary for field work supervision. A secondary qualifying agent is responsible only for the supervision of field work on sites where that license was used to obtain the permit. So as a secondary, you have a lot less responsibility than a primary or sole. Okay. And any other work for which they accept responsibility. Okay. And then a secondary qualifying agent is not responsible for supervision of financial matters. That's an important provision as well. So remember, as the sole primary, you are responsible for all the financial matters unless you have an FRO. And then if you're a secondary, though, you're not responsible for the financial matters. So being a secondary qualifying agent is not as big responsibility, but you're still, again, responsible for the supervision, for, the work that your license was used to pull those permits. So a business entity may designate a financial responsible officer. So let's kind of understand what they do. For purposes of certification or registration, this is subject to approval by the licensing board. So they would fill out an application essentially to be the FRO. They assume that FRO is going to assume personal responsibility for all the financial aspects of the business, and they cannot be the primary qualifying agent. So they got to be separated out. And then where a business entity is designated an FRO, the primary qualifying agent is responsible for all construction activities of the business still. All right, let's look at page 2-23, qualifying agents. So professional responsibility and liability. So qualifying agent's engagement of another to supervise their construction process will not relieve him of responsibility. In addition, a contractor may be fined up to $5,000 if an unlicensed person associated with the firm conceals material information from the firm's qualifying agent. So again, the qualifying agent's on the hook for whatever. See page 2-23. Do you want to highlight the bullets A through D? And that's going to be relating to the key principles affecting the role liability of the qualifying agent. I like that little summary. I think that's very good. Pages 223 and 224, you want to highlight the primary qualifying agent. These are definitions. The secondary qualifying agent, the business organization, and financial responsible officer. Again, this is a really good summary of what we've already discussed. And then there's a section on 224 other issues. Now, this is where that IRS common law test, what's an employee versus what's an independent contractor. That's what this section relates to. There's 4 pages here. We'll kind of go through them as a kind of a question and answer. So what are the 3 categories used in the IRS common law test? And these are just things you'd want to highlight. That's going to be behavioral, financial, and type of relationship, 2-25. See pages 224 through 228 for the other issues. So this is going to be, we're going to review the bullets for each of the 3 categories. And we're going to review the bullets for ways to avoid having independent contractors treated as employees. They kind of tell you what to do there. Page 2 I believe that one's 2-26. That's actually 2-28, the ways to avoid having independent contractors treated as employees. So just review those 4 or 5 pages. See 229, this is an important page. This is a section on penalties for unlicensed activities. So engaging in contracting of services or holding off oneself out to be a contractor without first obtaining a license is a violation of Florida law. And any person who falsely holds themselves out is guilty of what for the first offense, and the second offense is guilty of what? You'll see that on page 2-29 at the top. That's going to be first-degree misdemeanor and then third-degree felony. They do not mess around on this. So unlicensed contracting in Florida, they do enforce that. They throw a hammer down. So that's the good thing, because you're spending all this money, investing all this time to be licensed. You're subjecting yourself to the regulation of the state of Florida to make sure that you're following the rules. that you keep maintaining insurance. These are all the things that you're voluntarily doing, and it's not cheap, but it's in the best interest of the public. It's in the best interest of the licensed contractors who are going through this process. So unlicensed activity, they do take very seriously. And any action against a contractor for injury sustained resulting from the contractor's negligence, malfeasance, etc., the consumer is entitled to how many times the actual damage is sustained, and attorney's cost and attorney's fees. This is very, very important, and this question has been on the test a ton. And that is 3 times. CM 2-29. You'll see it just above changes in licensure information heading. And again, they kind of spell out that number 3. So a business organization must inform the DBPR by mail of any changes in the information required to be submitted on the application for qualification of a business organization within how many days of the change. So this is a DBPR provision, and this is any changes in the information required to be submitted on the application for qualifications. This is related to qualifying agents, and they have 45 days to submit that, CM 2-29. Now, again, the state, they like to ask questions, like trick questions, I would say. So if you look at this question, again, I bolded the changes in the information required to be submitted on the application for qualification. That's this particular question. But if you just peek over to page 2-133, the board rule states, so this is the board rule related to CILB, so 61G4, that changes in name, style, or address require 30 days notice. So they're different things. This one is required changes related to the qualifying agent information, whereas the items in red is an address change, but they're different days. So just again, this is just to illustrate that. Read the question carefully, because I promise you an answer in the question in blue, one of the options would be 30 days, probably option A. So trying to get you to misread some sections. So just be aware that you have to read the questions very carefully. Okay, let's go back to page 2-29 through 231, grounds for disciplinary action. So you're going to review the bullets A through Q. And again, this is something you'll see on BNF and possibly the CA exams. So how do you know which section in the summary or which statute, board rule in the book to reference? So how do you know which one to reference? If it says department in the question, it's probably DBPR, because DBPR is Department of Business Professional Regulation. That's typically going to be Florida Statute 455. If you get that question, it's probably a 455 question. If you see the word license or license holder or licensee in the question, again, that's probably DBPR, because DBPR covers all the licenses. We don't actually call the contractor's licenses a contractor's license. We call it a certificate. And you'll see that in just a second. If you see the word board in the question, a lot of times that's going to refer to CILB, because that's Construction Industry Licensing Board, CILB. Whereas the DBPR is the department, the CILB is the board. So you'll see that, and it's typically going to be a board rule 61G4. And then you have certification or registration, or certificate holder, or registrant, or contractor. That is Florida Statute 489. They don't really call them licenses within that statute. They call them certificates. It's a certified general contractor, certified building contractor, certified residential, certified roofing, certified plumbing. It's certified is the key word there for those. So see page 232, Florida Statute 455. The general provisions. This is the best way to navigate the statute is to review the table of contents. So not every question from 455 will be from the summary section, right? So if the statute itself is going to have every answer. So every question will be in the statute, but not every question will be in the summary. So it's a good practice to get familiar with how the table of contents for each statute is laid out. To me, that'll make sure that you can answer every question within any of these statutes or the board rules for that matter. Okay, so every question on the exam can be found in the statute, which I said you want to learn to navigate the statutes to pass the exams. These are the sections of note. We're going to start with 455. So we're going to be within the table of contents within 455. And I think, again, that one starts on 2-32. So these are just sections that we want to highlight. You got the definitions. Section 02, licensure of members of the armed forces. 10, restrictions on requirement of citizenship. So there is none. You do not have to be a citizen to be licensed. If you are an international applicant and you're not a resident of Florida or US citizen, you can, I have had students that use what's called an ITIN, International Tax ID number, which is similar to a social security number. And that's something that you could use on your application if you do not have a social security number issued by the IRS. And these are just some additional sections. I'll let you review these. Feel free to pause and you can highlight these as you go through. Definitely the disciplinary proceedings, ground for discipline, penalties, enforcement. Penalty for giving false information, that's felony of the 3rd degree. And section 2281, that's the unlicensed activities fees. This is section they talk about a $5 fee to fund efforts to combat unlicensed activity. That's been a test question as well. And again, we're still in DBPR, so that's $5 goes to any unlicensed activity, not just contracting license. 271, that's the inactive or delinquent status, renewal or cancellation notices. And you'll see here, again, something that's kind of different. The DBPR says you have 90 days. They're going to start like a licensure cycle. They'll send a renewal cancellation notice within 90 days. CILB says, nope, we're going to do that in 60 days. So you'll see that difference. You'll see that difference there. So let's review Florida Statute 489, Part 1. So we're in Contractors Manual 2-58. So these, again, there are sections of note. Section 103, for sure, the exemptions, you want to make sure you know where that is. Section 105, note definitions for general building residential contractors. 107, Construction Industry Licensing Board, goes over the provisions there. And let's keep going here. You have section 109s for fees. Licensure by examination, that's going to cover the experience requirements, educational credits, etc. Qualifications for practice, that's the trade exam exemption criteria. And the credit for military training or educational service. Medical gas certification, workers' comp coverage. That's where if you do not have it, they apply the $500 administrative fine. Section 115, certification and registration. So this is where they identify that 14 hours of CE, they tell you that 1 hour is actually equal to 50 minutes. That question's been on the exam. So if you're in a CE course or a CE class, that 1 hour, you'll see that they'll end at about 50 minutes because the state gives you that flexibility. And inactive and delinquent status, again, this is at 60 days as opposed to 90 from the DBPR. So the 60 days is the board has the right to shorten that if they want. And registration of specialty contractors must report CLB within 30 days of new local registration. So this is relevant to that registered contractor. The state still knows about them. They still keep track of the registered contractors. And you still have to update any information for registered contractors, but it only allows you to work within that local jurisdiction. 118, certification of registered. So again, you can grandfather in if you're a registered contractor for 5+ years with no fines in excess of $500. You could upgrade or grandfather into a certified contractor's license. The 5 years and the $500, that's the key for the exam. And section 119, business organizations. This is that qualifying agent that's 60 days to replace. And then you have the responsibility section in 1195. And that's all covered in the summary, but it's also covered in more detail within the statute itself in this section. Section 121, that's the emergency registration upon death of a contractor. 30 days is the key there. So if a contractor dies, you have to contact the board within 30 days. And 124 business record requirements. We reviewed that in the summary as well, but that's here in the statute, and that's the 3-year provision. 126, this is an important section. A lot of contractors may not know this, but if you receive more than 10% deposit, you have to apply for permits within 30 days, and you have to start work within 90 days of receiving the permit. 127, that's the prohibitions, penalties. This is important just to kind of know where it's located. 128, contracts entered into by unlicensed contractors are unenforceable. That's very important. Even if you have a license, but you're working outside the scope of that license, that contract will be unenforceable. Basically, that means you are not entitled to collect money on that contract. That contract will not be enforced. 129, disciplinary proceedings, the maximum administrative fine of $10,000. 141, conditions for recovery. This is the homeowners recovery fund. Florida, again, this is just additional commentary not in the book. Florida is the only state in the United States that has a homeowners recovery fund. It actually is a fund that reimburses homeowners who qualify if they are, if let's say a license, this is just for licensed contractors. They use a licensed contractor, that contractor takes their money and doesn't do the work, and they actually win a civil judgment. They can file a claim within 1 year of that civil judgment to recover those monies that are owed them, or the money that they lost from the homeowners recovery fund. And I go to the board meetings typically every month, and they do these homeowner recovery funds, and the recovery fund is in the $600,000-700,000 range every month that these homeowners are reimbursed. So it's the only state that does that. So it's very interesting. But the 1 year to file a claim is very important for the exam. So if you're a homeowner, you have to file that claim within 1 year of getting that final civil judgment. And then just review the provisions of the recovery fund there. 49, part 2, electrical alarm, not really concerned with that. More importantly, you just want to know where that section is so you don't go into it. And then part 3 is the septic. Okay, don't tab and highlight those sections, just you want to know where they are so you don't find your way in there. So what are the board rules? 61G4, Florida statute 49107, that created the construction licensing board. And we already kind of reviewed this. What is the difference between the board rules and Florida statute 49? We kind of reviewed that as well. Statute creates the law, the CLB enforces the law. And board rules 61G4, these are the sections of note. Organization and purpose. So time for compliance, penalties shall be paid within 30 days. And the 18% interest rate. These are things you want to highlight within that section 61G4-12. And that is, let me just get to it real quick. Yeah, that's going to be in the first one is item 1. The 18% interest is item 3 on that list. 61G4-12. So we're 12009. That's the fees. This is actually the exam fees. You're going to pay $135 to DBPR to get the candidate ID number, and then you're going to pay $80 to test for the business finance, and then $80 per trade exam. For Division 1, you have 2 trade exams, so they split it into $40 a piece. But if you're taking the roofing test or the plumbing test, the AC exam, it's going to be $80 because Division 2 applicants only have 1 trade test to take plus the business finance, whereas Division 1 applicants, you got 3 tests. So review the fees in this section. The definition section, they define a story, 7 feet minimum clear height. Advertise, the definition there does not apply to trinkets or novelty items, but you do have to put your license number. They're talking about things you have to put your license number on when you advertise. So on a commercial or on a sign, your license number would have to be there, but not on trinkets or novelty items. And then we have the renewal exemption as well. Oops. Okay. Is penalty in the index? Well, yep, it is in the index, for which subheading are relevant to this module. So you want to go, for in this case, just to the ones that are relevant to chapter 2. Penalties are the financial action and or legal action given to a contractor for violating a rule or the rules. And penalties have a range. That's an important thing versus like a fine, which is a set amount. The CILB does have the authority to give you a penalty within a certain range. There's a minimum and a maximum depending on first offense, second offense. See the Florida Administrative Code, Chapter 61, G4 17. That's page 2-158. And if you go to that page, you'll see there's a table there. The first column is the violations column, and then you have the penalty ranges, minimum, maximum. And just be aware there are within these a first offense, a second offense, or a first offense and repeat offense. So just you would identify the violation, and then you would just go over and look at the range. They could ask you various different types of questions off that chart. Okay, is citation in the index? So yes, it's under DBPR and licensing construction. So I want to make sure that we kind of are looking at our index right now. So fines are typically for minor violations. They're non-discretionary. So a fine is just a set of, it's like a speeding ticket, it's a set amount. You did this, you pay. There's no investigation. There's no consideration of mitigating factors. There's no range of anything. Typically, the board's not gonna take those up. You pay your fine, you move on. And the fines are on page 2-171, and you'll kind of see that they're minor violations, $100, $200, maybe $500 fine. So just be aware of that. You still have the violations and then the fine amount for that. So just as a recap, you have DBPR, that's 455. You have 489. Florida Statute 489 covers the 3 boards. The CILB parts 1, 2, and 3, and then you have the board rule 61G4. That's the CILB board rule. So those are just a little recap of the licensing piece. So let's do some practice questions now. We'll kind of use that trick method here to sort of navigate through and see if we can identify some of these questions. So what is the minimum amount of liability insurance required by law for a sheet metal contractor? Well, our topic there is insurance, law, Florida statute. We know our reference is contractor's manual. We're going to go to insurance and then public liability, and you're going to see that table. And we know that the liability insurance requirement is $100,000. And that is 216. I'm just going to go to it just so we can get on that table. And there it is, $100,000. Now we're going to keep moving on. What is the amount of unlicensed activity fee that is charged upon licensure and renewal? So again, we're going to be keyword there, licensure fees. Contractor's manual is our reference. Let's go to that index, see what we can find. Now, Florida statutes, DBPR. Board chapter 455, the table of contents. And you'll see it's that $5. That's covered in your highlighting guide, and we also covered it in the presentation already. So we gave you a little cheat sheet, and we keep on moving. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to get a little more comfortable with how to navigate the books, especially the statutes. Let's keep going. Are highway, street, road, and bridge contractors exempt from state licensure requirements? Well, so again, the topic, licensure exemptions, contractor's manual, exemptions, licensing, construction. So yeah, the topic, probably wouldn't put this on Florida Statute 455 because they are specific to construction. I would be on 489 on that. And you can see that list there. That's an important list. Get familiar with that. You don't have to memorize the list, but just know where it is and sort of get familiar with what's included in the exemptions. And then you're going to keep moving. So businesses that collect sales tax must register with which state department? We talked about that a little bit already. So our topic here is tax, sales tax. Reference is contractor's manual. We're going to do taxes, sales tax, and the index. 115 it takes us, and we see Department of Revenue. And we keep on moving. Just some additional practice questions here. I'm going to go through these, just let you do these. I'm going to go through them, just pause, and I'm going to show the answer. And then you can continue through. So that was a great job. Thank you for attending today's class. You did awesome. So you're one step closer to business finance exam, and also possibly the contract administration test if you're Division I. If the next steps would be to take the Module 1 practice exam in your student account. You're going to see a series of questions related to just these 2 chapters. It'll be a really great way to kind of test the trig method or whatever method you are comfortable with in terms of trying to navigate the books, find the information, answer the questions. And don't forget, if you're scoring 80% or above on those module practice quizzes, you're in really good shape to continue on. So if you have additional questions, again, the orientation is every Monday from 5 to 6:30. The orientation is really great for, I just give you a nice foundation. If you're a newer student, it's a great resource for you. The office hours would be where you kind of bring specific program questions about any of the content that you're struggling with. That's every Wednesday from 11 to 1. That Zoom link is in your student account, so you can access that. And then please email us at contractor@goldcoastschools.com with any questions that you might have. So I hope that you enjoyed the module today. I know we covered a ton of stuff, so feel free to watch this as many times as you want. Pause, rewind, fast forward. Always feel free to reach out to us. And I hope that you can leave us some feedback, how to improve the program, how to improve the module, or that you enjoyed it. We love the positive feedback as well. But thank you so much. We'll see you on the next module, and best of luck and keep going. We'll see you soon.